Hey, what's up? This is Chosen. Time to get back to the normal daily content grind. I hope all of you have had a fantastic holiday season, and it's that time of year where we take a look at the retrospective of 2023. We move into a new year, and it's time to kind of put a bow on 2023, and I thought it would be fun to take a look back as we head into the new year, and we may do like the top 10 legendaries overall at this moment in time for like non-void and void and all of that. But I've been playing since basically day one, and I want to go back in time and talk about what the top 10 non-void legendaries were at the launch of the game when Raid Shadow Legends was actually released. Like, basically, if I could go back and redo the grades with what I know now, if I could go back to 2019 and grade them, what would I grade them? And I do still have the last iteration of this tier list that I first made back when I was like Chofly Mobile here on the channel. This was the first spreadsheet I made, then I just kind of kept working on it over the years, and it was last touched in 2021. So this won't be perfectly accurate because I did work on this for like a year and a half until I did like the updated, more fancy stuff that you see now. But when I was first a content creator for the game, this was that first tier list that I made into a spreadsheet. And it's just kind of funny to look back on this and how much more we know now. Like, I have Duchess behind Netheril, which is just hilarious. I have, Prince Kaimar behind Netheril and Battle Kazar and stuff. So way different just kind of discussion and way of thought going on back then. Like, back then, this wasn't really viewed as crazy. People were like, okay, yeah, whatever. I mean, obviously you get disagreements on tier lists, but we didn't know as much, and we didn't have like clan boss calculators, and we didn't have all sorts of these optimizers and RSL helper and the HH gaming artifact optimizer. We were all kind of like a lot more casual back then. And if we talk about the launch of the game, a lot of these champions weren't truly launch champions, or they were buffed within that first year when Raid was still a new game. So you have champions right here like Duchess that did come out early in Raid's lifespan, but was not in the game on launch. And then you have champions like Dracomorph, who was one of the worst legendaries in the game, but he got buffed about like 10 or 11 months after release, and then he became one of the best legendaries in the game. But okay, let's go through what would be the top 10 legendaries that were in the game on launch, and it'll be kind of an interesting look back as to how some of these have been power crept. So at number 10, I'm going to go with Altan. And by the way, if you don't see some obvious choices that you think like, what? How can you not have Syl the Drakes? Wasn't she around on launch? If I don't include a champion that seems obvious, it's because they weren't in the game like actually at launch at the start of 2019, right after that first initial beta. But okay, so first of all, the meta was a lot different back then. The most important thing that everybody was trying to get to was getting the Nightmare maxed out clan boss chest and being able to 2 or 3 key getting max chest. There was no Ultra Nightmare or anything. It was just Nightmare. And for the first like 8 months of the game, there was no War Master Mastery, so everybody was just doing Giant Slayer with multi-hitters and stuff like that. So the meta in the most important area of the game was bringing people that can lower attack consistently on the Demon Lord, which back then it was the clan boss, and then also giving you enough sustain like defense and shield and ally protect and stuff like that to live long enough to crank out 25-30 million damage. So Altan was a champion with an A1 that could very reliably lower attack, which was one of the best A1s in the game back then for the clan boss, and he was tanky, and he provided the defense up, which was very rare back then, and a shield if he killed an enemy, but that's obviously not going to happen in the Demon Lord. So you're mainly bringing him for the defense and the tankiness and the super consistent decreased attack. So back then, he was actually a very sought after champion and very viable, plus he was a good progression beginner champion. Then at number 9, I'm going to go with Lord Chantfor, and obviously back then the threshold for being a good legendary was a lot different. There was probably like 75 legendaries on launch. Now there's like 210 or something. So champions that seem like they're underwhelming now, they would have actually been really good back then in 2019. But we have an A1 again that's going to lower defense, and he's a tanky champion, so he would work very well with the Demon Lord and with the different progression type stuff you're trying to do as a new player, while lowering accuracy, which is super rare, and then also that AoE decrease attack while having a passive that's going to place a shield and then also a decreased speed with a huge aura of 50% to help you progress in those dungeons. Lord Chantfor was one of the first legendaries that I summoned. I believe he was number 2 or 3. somewhere in there. I think he was the first legendary I booked, and he was a solid source of progression for me back then in 2019 as the number 9 Lego on launch. Number 8, we've got Rosin Scarhide. Now, one of the coolest things that Plarium ever did for the game was adding Rosin as a permanent fusion that players could go after in the summoning portal as a permanent option for them to add this champion to the roster as long as they were willing to work towards it. And he is a very solid champion for new players, or at least he was back then. The triple hitter was amazing in the clan boss meta back then. And then you also had the ability to place the defense down and the weaken. So Rosin was one of the most popular champions back then in the Demon Lord. The A3 wasn't great for the Demon Lord, but it was amazing in places like the arena or for progression for slamming all those turn meters down and hitting the AoE damage. Plus, he was a defense tanky champion, so very, very good back in 2019. Number 7, we're going to go with Bigan. Bigan had a very rare ability to hit all enemies on his default as long as he's critting with that A1. He was one of the best damage dealers on launch for sure. He had another AoE right here that could also do some CC and lowering accuracy, and another AoE that would decrease turn meter and then also decrease speed. So back in the day, you would see Bigan all the time in the arena, and for being a new player looking for some CC and some damage dealers and stuff like that, Bigan was an awesome summon back then. Number 6, we're going to go with Ray. Now, Ray has been power crept a ton, but back in 2019, she was very exciting. She had the AoE A1 that could lower defense, so just that constant wave of trying to build your campaign farmers, trying to progress in dungeons, and just everything you were doing, you summon her and you're instantly better in the arena. She just had that super consistent AoE damage and defense break that was very amazing back then, with another AoE that would hit really hard, and another AoE that would do AoE buff strip, and also place some CC freeze with an amazing 33% speed R to help you progress in dungeons. So back in the day, you would run into Ray all the time in PvP, and the threshold for being good in PvP was way, way less back then. So Ray was a very popular nuker and also a popular dungeon, campaign farmer, progression type champion. Then for number 5, we're going to go with Leandra. Now, she was a champion that took the raid community a long time to kind of realize exactly how good she was. But back then, the PvP meta was like, you have to go first, and then you have to boost your attack, and then break their defense, and then nuke them. That was like what 95% of teams in the arena were. And Leandra was amazing because she would not only boost your turn meter, but she would increase your speed and then also decrease the turn meter of all enemies. So it would make it easier for you to fill in that gap and get your whole team to go and nuke before them. But then she was also ridiculously amazing in PvE content because of her ability right here to fully deplete the turn meter and bring one of the best auras in the game of 24% speed in all battles with an amazing base speed of 110. A little bit of raid history 101. The best base speed back then was actually Arbiter, and it was so high that they nerfed it. So if we stay in the high elves and we go to Arbiter, Arbiter's base speed on the launch of the game was 120. That's the highest we've ever seen a champion be for base speed. I believe now the record is 115, and it was nerfed from 120 to 110 because the meta was just so like nothing else was viable. So Plarium was trying to kind of throw darts at the board and change random stuff here and there. But yeah, Arbiter was changed from 120 to 110, and she was the fastest champion in the game. But Leandra was tied with her with that 110 base speed and was really good not only back then, but Leandra is still very useful right now just because of all the turn meter manipulation and the great aura and all of that. And then for number 4, we're going to go with Bad Kazar. So remember what I told you the meta was. In the most important thing was the clan boss. And back then it was all about poisons and lowering attack and breaking its defense and just sustaining. Well, Bad Kazar would not only buff the damage of your entire clan boss team by placing poisons himself and then making your whole team inflict more damage, but he would also do the poisons almost permanently on the clan boss, and then also the heals on your whole team almost permanently, while also healing your whole roster every time he did his A1. So he was ridiculous in the clan boss. He was ridiculous in every progression team you were trying to build, and he was one of the best champions in the game you could summon in 2019 to help really bolster your account. And he actually is the champion that I made my channel art after Plarium came to us and asked us what champion we would like our face drawn as for a champion or somebody in a faction, or like a faction theme and all that. And I said at Bad Kazar, he was my favorite champion back when I started playing Raid. And then at number 3, we've got Prince Kaimar. Now, again, a little bit similar to Leandra. We knew Prince Kaimar was good. We didn't know how ridiculously cracked he was, though. Like I said, the meta was a little bit different. He wasn't used nearly as often in PvP as he is now back then, but he did have one of the best auras in the game for arena speed, and obviously anytime you have a champion that resets all cooldowns of your allies, and then a lot of people forget about this, but he also fills the turn meter by 20% when he does that, so it's just a ridiculous ability, along with the AoE buff strip and CC with the AoE A1 that places poison when critical. So obviously Prince Kaimar is still in 2024 even going to be an account changing champion, and he was on the list for sure back in 2019. But why wasn't Prince Kaimar number one? First of all, there was no Duchess in the game. And nowadays, people kind of consider Duchess and Kaimar to be the top two non-void champions in the game. But the top two was kind of undisputed. We had two Queens of Raid. And first off, we had Martyr. Now, the reason that Martyr and the number one champion were the Queens of Raid is because counterattack was ridiculous. The most important areas of the game were the clan boss and the Fire Knight and the Spider. Those three areas were like the hardest for people to progress in, and back then the meta was counterattack. You would just try to proc as many War Masters masteries as you can. Once it got added to the game, like 8, 9, 10 months or whatever, once War Master got added to the game, you were just trying to proc as many counterattacks as possible in the clan boss. And Martyr was just ridiculous because she would do the CC of Provoke for PvE content. She would also lower the attack. She would increase defense. She would place that counterattack on a 3-turn cooldown, and she would break the defense here on the A1 while bringing an all-battle defense aura. So Martyr was just absolutely insane, ridiculous. A lot of people viewed her as the best legendary in the game. The community, as a consensus, definitely graded her top 3. And you probably know by now, if Martyr was number 2, for the reasons that I gave you, Valkyrie was the best legendary in the game. And the reason being is because she could be annoying in PvP, because of every time they increase the turn meter, Valkyrie's going to sit here and constantly decrease their turn meters and make it super annoying in PvP. So she was viable there because the meta was obviously boosting turn meters. Then you had the AoE, not only counterattack, but a massive shield for 3 turns, which was an eternity back then. That was very, very rare. So what she would enable you to do is survive a very long time in the clan boss, but also places like the Spider, and also wreck progression in the Fire Knight. And then she also has an A1 right here that was a multi-hitter, which would decrease turn meter and be amazing in the Fire Knight as well, with bringing that aura right here that was added with faction crypts a little bit later on to make her absolutely god tier in the faction wars when that was released. But yeah, Valkyrie, because of the counterattack and the shield and the turn meter and the multi-hitter and all that, she was viewed as consensus. Again, people went back and forth on if it was Martyr or Valkyrie, but she was definitely a consensus top 3 legendary back then. So I hope you enjoyed this look down memory lane. And again, remember, a lot of the champions you expected to hear in this list weren't out yet. There was no Dwarves, Shadowkin, or Sylvan Watchers. None of those existed. And a lot of the best champions in the game, your Duchess and stuff like that, they were not added to the roster yet. So we were looking back at what the top 10 were back at the launch in 2019. And we'll have a lot more tier lists and top 10s and stuff coming out like that as we move into 2024. And we try to prepare everybody for launching into the new year with as much content out there for trying to grade and give as much context as we can around Raid Shadow Legends into 2024. So I appreciate all of you. Remember to subscribe on your way out if you enjoy daily Raid Shadow Legends content, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Peace.